Hello, and welcome to a talk about reciprocity, in our series on reciprocity. And this talk is about the obstacles that arise to healthy reciprocal relationships. I entitled this Fear, False Stories, and the Obstacles to Healthy Reciprocity. And those of you that have been studying with me for a while might already have an idea of the text and the particular part of that text, which is going to very much inform our discussion today and kind of structure our discussion today. And that is the kleshas from the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. The kleshas show up in other texts and other teachings of yogic or non-dualist and also Buddhist philosophy. And kleshas basically means obstacles. So in the Yoga Sutras, right at the beginning, Patanjali tells us that that we are here to experience yoga, and that yoga can only be experienced when we have dealt with what he calls the chitta vritti, these thoughts which are always shifting and changing, but tempt us to make our identity upon them, to believe that they are the self. And we learn that it is not all chitta or consciousness or thoughts or ways of thinking. Peta came by for a little visit, that are problematic, but specifically the chitta vritti. These vritti means like shift and change, and then he tells us that the chitta vritti really come from these kleshas. So here we are talking about relationships with other human beings, not just our meditation practice, not just our inner world. But my suggestion is that ultimately the practices for healing our relationships begin exactly the same way, with meditation, with yoga, with dealing with our own thoughts, with dealing with our own inner world. And so today's talk is really about, it's kind of a similar thing. Life is relationship. Relationships are good. There are relationships where we're going to experience challenges and obstacles. And relationship practice is about doing that work. And so just the same way in the Yoga Sutras, life is consciousness, life is chitta. Our experience, our I amness is a chitta. It's awareness. And that's great. But when we're experiencing all the chitta vritti and endowing that with the essence of life, then that means that we're going to have to deal with our obstacles. So that's what we're dealing with today. When people wrote in at the beginning of this reciprocity journey about their relationship issues, what I heard a lot of is ultimately people being concerned about boundaries in relationships, about a healthy sense of taking care of one's own space, energy, and resources and time, while also being loving toward the other. And this is this problem area of relationships, of sort of, where do I end and you begin? How much do I need to, as a loving human, be participating in your reality and your life? And how much do I need to be honoring myself and really just staying with my own stuff? And what I'm going to talk about today in this application of the kleshas teachings to our relationships, um, I think speaks to that in a really helpful and succinct way. So let's dive on in. So the kleshas themselves, as some of you watching are familiar with, um, the kleshas are false stories, or stories that are not totally true, narratives called avidya. And it is said in the Yoga Sutras that as long as there's these stories, all these other kleshas are necessarily going to grow from them, just like a fertile field. Without you having to do anything, any extra effort, a fertile field you'll start seeing things grow there. Life will find a way in that field. And so that means that as long as we are going around with a psyche that is telling narrative, and that is very engrossed in narrative, inevitably some kind of challenges are going to arise, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that we stop recognizing that narratives exist, or that we have stories, or that we have thoughts, but it means that we're ready for it, and we are not caught off guard when these other things happen as well. The next thing that happens after the stories, the narratives, is an ego. And one way to think about an ego is just, what's the character in that story? You're telling yourself a story. What is the character in that you identify with? And necessarily because of the way that stories go, as I claim my character, I'm the protagonist, I'm the hero, or I'm the beloved, I'm the villain, I'm the bad guy. Whatever role that you have chosen in that narrative as your ego, you will necessarily have assigned other people the other parts in that story, or other beings, or society itself, or right, or the government, or right. But you're going to have assigned, if I'm the good guy who has to slay the dragon, who's the dragon? And so there's the story, which if we were just, in a creative writing session, might just be like remain kind of pure narrative that we're not attached to. But what ego means, once we have asmita, it means that we are now essentially applying our narrative to the reality that we see, to the I am, and to these other beings around me, and trying to make life match our story, starting with me. I want me to match my story about myself. And then we get this fun pair that always go together, raga and devesha, which means attachment and aversion. So I'm going to be attached. I'm going to start to feel attachment in the spaces where my story is being validated, where my ego self is being, where I'm encouraged to believe that, oh yeah, though, this is right. I was right. I am the hero. An interesting little tidbit here. We can also, even though there's pain involved in this, we can also get attached to the stories, absolutely, and we do, to a story, I'm the victim, or I'm the villain. Have you ever had this experience of, and it is a raga and devesha always go together. It's always this push and pull of attachment and aversion, and it's just not a fun ride. But have you ever had that experience of feeling almost like satisfied and sated, and like there's a kind of a yes there when somebody validates a negative self-image. There's like a part of you that's like, yeah, or I am the bad guy. Yeah. Or I am the victim here and woe is me. When we get stuck in a victim mode, there's a kind of addiction. There's a kind of attachment to that. Because even though it's maybe not a very positive story, we get our kleshas make us want to feed them. And when we're having that experience, there's something satisfying in that simple sort of black and white looking at the world being validated. So that's raga, that's attachment. And then there's aversion. We're averse to where we do not want validated the things that don't match our story, that don't make us feel like, oh, I know. Avidya is false knowledge. I know what's going on. And we're going to reject whatever doesn't feed that. We know now, what Patanjali didn't have this, at least not in this kind of way, on his radar, but we know now about, if somebody on the line remembers exactly what this is called. I want to say cognitive dissonance, but it's not, but it's I think it's just called cognitive bias, but if somebody on here knows what it is and I'm saying it wrong, please remind me. But this has now been studied scientifically, that raga and devesha are really emotional experiences. I want that. I don't want that, right? That when we are having an emotional experience like that, that emotional part of us, which is much more ancient, a much deeper system in a way than our rational mind, which is much newer, evolutionarily, that is, right? That part of our brain developed much later in evolution. But that when we're in raga and devesha, essentially, or when we're in an emotional state, when we're in attachment and aversion, right? Again, they come together. I'm attached to this, which means I am necessarily, by being so attached to this, I'm going to fight you if you come for that, or you tell me that's not true, or it's not good, or it's not valuable, whatever. But what the science says now is that very intelligent, well-educated, usually rational beings, when in this kind of state, when in that emotional attached state and averse state, will override rationality and just kind of rewrite truth. And this is how you get a lot of what we're seeing full on right now in our reality, of people just wanting to believe so badly what they already believe that they are cut off from new knowledge, from revelation, from transformation, from more subtle or nuanced versions of the truth. Okay, the last klesha is fear, the last klesha that goes along with all of this. And we're told, is experienced even by the wise, that fear goes along with all of this. Fear is there in our experience of attachment. Fear is there in our experience of aversion. Fear is there whenever the ego is strong. Fear is there whenever we're really in our stories. And so when we meditate, we are learning to de-invest, to divest, to take our energy away from the stories, the ego, to stop, to take a pause for that 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes you're meditating, for the couple of days that you're on retreat, however long your practice is. The idea is that I'm going to stop practicing my attachment and my aversion, or I'm going to be much more aware of that mechanism, at least. Let's say that. I'm going to be aware of my fear, and I'm going to stop giving those things the power of of identifying with them, thinking that's me, I'm going to take away the power of them having so much authority. And we do that by learning how to train our attention on something simple, real, happening here and now, on the I amness. It helps to have a touchstone, right? Or mantra or something to repeat. But ultimately, we're learning how to just be with the experience that we're actually having right now. And if you do that right now and you feel what it's like to take a deep breath, you are in that moment, you're not in a story, you're real, you're here. You're not a character, you're not just, you know, this thing. You're not the good guy, you're not the bad guy. And the more that we do that, the easier it becomes to be in a space where we are no longer attached or averse. Do you see how being attached and averse is meaning it's always keeping us and having to do. We're always having to maintain, to fix, to control. We never get to take our fingers off the knobs or the joystick, so to speak. We never get a break. Okay. So now I'm going to actually go into how we apply this. Okay. Because when we're in a relationship where things are not reciprocal, when things are not healthy, when one person's giving too much and someone's taking too much, let's say, um, or we're hurting each other, right? An ideal reciprocal relationship looks kind of like, the relationships in nature, right? Where the sun and the water and the air and the plants and the animals, right? We're all giving and receiving and creating this beautiful world all together. Um, when that's not happening in relationships, all it takes is one or more beings in that relationship to be experiencing the kleshas. So essentially, meditate, do your own work. But I will say, step one of meditation is the same as sort of step one of beginning the journey, which may take longer than this lifetime, beginning the journey of healing a particular relationship, getting back into a place of healthiness and reciprocity. It is to call your awareness back to your realm. Call your awareness back to what your experience is. Patanjali gives us a good clue to this when he tells us that raga is actually not attachment to something else, it's attachment to pleasure. And devesha is not actually rejection or pushing away of another being. Foremost, it is a pushing away of the experience of pain, or an attempt to. This is actually really helpful. This is really, really helpful. Step one is in taking ownership back into of the situation into oneself. Before we can solve the relationship, we have to be able to address our own kleshas, which might be triggered by another being, which absolutely certainly will be and are triggered by other beings and our relationships with them. But if we can come back to our own direct experience, and if we can really buy into this belief that 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 what that you are only in charge of sort of your own limited scope of reality, and that how you affect and influence everybody around you comes from your ability to care for that inner space, to know it, to understand it, to have the self-awareness, to accept it. That's why I said we have to kind of buy into this. To humbly admit, I experience kleshas, you know, and to say, I'm going to learn how to be with myself and my inner world without creating more kleshas, ideally. So we have to stop, the avidya, the stories. We have to learn how to be with something that's not just the stories and the ego, the identities. And there's actually a key right here in these short little lines in the Yoga Sutras about raga and devesha. Can you be with pleasure while also practicing non-attachment? And I want you to try this, throughout your day and when you meditate and just whenever, when pleasure arises, notice if it's like okay, that cookie gave me the pleasure, I want another. Or can you be with the pleasure itself? Knowing it's totally natural to want more pleasure, kind of built into the nature of pleasure. And yet, our work is to let that experience be what it is and not try to just keep it going perpetually, to hang on to it for forever. And with pain, and this has been somewhere that my practice has very strongly been here for a while, especially because I've been experiencing a lot of physical pain, but also we can do this with emotional pain, all kinds of pain. Can you be with your pain without going straight for devesha, without going straight for no, go away, bad? This actually all brings that whole exercise brings us back to the reality that, again, we're in charge of this inner world and this inner experience. And there's going to be cookies, and there's going to be, health challenges or injuries that cause pain. These things are going to arise in our life, right? The things that seem to trigger the pleasure or the pain, they will be here. Our job is to return to the actual experience itself and see if we can be with those experiences. And then what we're doing is, again, divesting our energy, our power from the cookies in the world. It means we stop believing, right? When we're really in raga, it's essentially addiction. I need more of this thing that is not me, that is outside of me, in order to be happy. Devesha is, I need to kill all of that or put up a wall so none of that can ever touch me again. Then I'll be happy. We're never going to be able to experience this peace and reciprocity, and wholeness, if we can't begin to shift our relationship to pleasure and pain, and shift the ways that we respond from attachment and aversion to something a little bit more like awareness and acceptance, to trust. This cookie will be gone. There will be more pleasure, and I'm going to still be here. My I amness is here. My awareness is here. All right. So doing your own self-work means being able to return to this inner space, where your power actually lies, your realm that you're actually in charge of. And I encourage you to do do inquiry work that explores in whatever relationship is challenging right now. Just pick one and you can do this with. Do some inquiry about the kleshas. What is the story that I'm telling myself? And maybe investigate that story. The narrative likely came actually from some other model or someone else. Someone taught this to you, or you watched a bunch of rom-coms and or I don't know, and that's where that narrative came from. But explore the avidya itself, the narrative itself, the stories itself. Inevitably, you're going to find some kind of should. This relationship should be more like this. I should be receiving something more like this. I should. And just investigate for yourself, and notice that those stories are always going to be partial. There can absolutely be, and there usually is, some kind of truth to those stories, but it will never be the whole truth. And so as you start to investigate your narratives, that will help immensely in letting them be less black and white, less rigid, less letting those shoulds seem less urgent, so that you can begin to make space for a relationship narrative or a relationship structure that is more true to what this one is. To make space for new narratives to perhaps be written by you, and ideally by you and this other person in partnership. Inquire into your own stories about yourself, your own identities, what role am I playing in this narrative, and how attached am I to that? What role does this other person play, and how averse to that am I? So that's all self-work. That's all done on your own. And in my experience, an enormous, the majority of the work is the self-work. But then there are the times when we come together with the other, where there is, the other with whom we have some conflict or challenge. And what do we do then? How do we sort of move forward? So here's just sort of my pointers on that. Okay, number one, you if you and or the other party are experiencing the kleshas, if any of that is very strong and present, um, then it is not a time to sort of rationally discuss or work out a solution to your relationship. It's just not the time. I mentioned before the sort of emotional brain and then the rational brain. And when we're in a very high intensity emotional place, the prefrontal cortex is shut down. It doesn't have, it's not online. We are in the place where our body is saying in some way we're in danger. If there's that fear, we're in danger, and we're not gonna, we need all of our energy to either run away, fight, or in some other way miraculously like pull everything out that we've got to get out of this life or death situation. That is not a time when someone's going to be open to hearing new things, rewriting their narratives, considering another perspective. That is a time for doing very simple grounding work. When you are in that state, this conflict person might not be the right person to comfort you or bring you out of it. And so in those cases, I have a short list that I'm very, very, very grateful that I have of of people in my life that tend to be really good and wise and kind, and that for whatever reasons, you don't even have to understand the reasons. When I'm in their presence, even if it's on the phone, my nervous system starts to come back into to balance. um, I can start to drop out of that overly emotional state and back into somewhere that feels less afraid and more at peace. And when we are in a fear state, a traumatized state, and anything like that, um, yeah, not only is it not the time to really resolve a conflict, it's also not a time to be around another person or be in a situation um, that is just making those intense feelings worse. So get thee to a safe space. Um, get thee to a place where someone can really help ground you and bring you back into yourself. Uh, Once that's possible, if you're able to create a circumstance where both parties feel comfortable, um, and sometimes that means both parties also having, so say you want to just go ahead and do some conflict resolution, it can be really helpful for both parties to have either a shared presence of a person, or they each bring their own person, but somebody who makes them feel safe. Recognize that in that other person has all their kleshas, and in their story, you might say, well, I'm really nice, I'm really friendly, I'm da, da, da. You don't necessarily know why, but in their story version of the story, your presence, at least right now, it's triggering. And you're not a calming person for them for whatever reason. You're not. And to start to be able to see everyone around us is also having their own kleshas. I've got mine. And to say, first off, if I really, really care about resolving this, I want that person to also have their safe people. I can humbly accept that I'm not that for them right now. Right? Are we attached to the idea that we always have to be the good guy for in everybody else's narrative? Right? That's something to explore. To want that other person to get the same things that you have and need, to give them to yourself first, and then really, really hope, that wherever that other person is at the moment, that they're getting that too. When you come together, bring touchstones. Bring touchstones, whether, again, like I said, it's an actual human being. A mediator is an example of this, somebody who, both people trust and believe in their wisdom, and their care. And if there isn't a mutual person, then yeah, maybe each of you has your own little person with you. But a touchstone, of course, can be many things. A touchstone could be the stone that you brought on your last meditation retreat with you, that you sat with in meditation, that has some of that energy, or whatever it is. Bring with you some kind of touchstone or talisman or being that can help you come back into your own experience, into your own realm. When um, when you start a conversation like this, see if you can um, I do want to back up for a second, because there is some more there is some more work that I would do before coming into a conversation like this. More inquiry work, which is basically, I kind of said it a second ago, but I want to actually just say this. It's basically doing some inquiry around. You gotta do your work first, and then do some inquiry around and just some exploration of what might their experience be. Recognize that this is just inquiry and exploration. Um, recognize that this is just, I'm going to say this again and again because it's just so important. You actually don't know their inner world. You are not in charge of their story. You don't know their background. But you can play around a little bit in preparation for this with what it might be and with gathering some empathy around that. Yeah, okay. Now I'll continue what I was about to say, and you can kind of imagine that if you were to go ahead and have this conversation or do this kind of conflict resolution moment with another person, there's some homework that you might end up having to do around the other person's experience too. But what I don't want to, what's really important, and where I see this issue arising, even with people who have studied nonviolent communication or have done all this meditation and self work or whatever, it is an essential first act of respect to say, I don't know everything about you. I can't and I won't, and that's not my job. To say, you are the authority on you. Something that I've mentioned before in this series is there are these kinds of natural laws that if we don't respect them, we're gonna get pushback, even when we're very well intentioned. And one of these natural laws that we've talked about is everyone has their own inner world. Every person has their own inner world, their own space that they're in charge of. That's how it's designed. And the same way that nobody else is in charge of your inner world, nobody else is in charge of meditating for you, getting to know yourself, no one else is in charge of experiencing your pleasures, your pains, your desires. No one else can say what your journey is all about. No one else has had all the specific experiences that you have. No one else can touch your I amness. And no one else can validate that or say that it's good or bad or worthy. The universe already did that. That's how you got here. So no other human can do that. Extending, when we don't extend that to ourselves or others, there's pain, period. And so that's something to really, really be watchful of, especially for us meditators, of going into a space and saying, hey, I meditate and I do all this self-inquiry. I'm really healing myself. And so let me tell you about you and your journey, right? We're gonna get pushback because we're breaking, whether that person even understands consciously or cognitively, even if a toddler understands this, even if they don't understand it cognitively, but a toddler will also follow this natural law. Pushback. I push back against that. Okay, so when you show up to this space, do your best to speak and act from the places that you have authority. So, my inner world, number one, and really give yourself that authority. This is another thing a lot of us do who are so nice. We we invalidate our own feelings or experiences. No, no, you have to also model in this instance and really stand up for your own inner world. You are the authority on that, and you have to be able to get to know it and speak with authority from it. Okay, so that's number one. The only other place that I also have authority, and I do have a certain amount, but it's slightly different, and it's kind of it's not a total authority. I'm not a dictator or whatever of this, but my shared world. I do also have some responsibility for the container that we all share. So whoever this is, you have a shared world. And something that and so okay, so I'll say this. The first one, my inner experience, I can speak with total authority about my own direct experience, right? Outer world, I can speak with relatively good authority about the outer world. Um, and specifically about my direct experiences with the outer world. Stay away from conjecture, stay away from anything that you didn't see, stay away from gossip, you know. But so what I mean by this is I can say, I'm feeling this way. No one, just being honest about your own feelings, right? And then you could also say, I saw that you left the dishes in the sink again, and that contributes to this feeling of being disrespected and overwhelmed when that happens. That person might be able to tell you something else about your outer world that you didn't actually know about because you were upstairs, but somebody else made those dishes or something. Be willing. We have to be able to really own what we can own, and to let there be mystery and unknownedness in these other spaces, right? I can still absolutely speak with authority about my sink, but also be willing to hear about the things that happen that you didn't know about in that shared world. Um, the so something that is, I think, that's just like a really beautiful way to begin that this whole process is an acknowledgement of our care for our shared world. So this is a thing that can be very, very challenging in conflict situations, is getting on the same page about anything. And so see what you can do, right? I've got my inner world. You're not the authority in that. I am. Please don't tell me about my inner world or the dishes in my inner world sink, or you don't get to speak about that, right? And then you've got yours. And so rather than going and right off the gate about trying to tell them about something about their inner world, or how can we build trust that we both actually, there's something where our care aligns, where our love aligns. We both care about this shared world of this kitchen, right? Um, we both, have been having some conflict with my siblings and their partners, and we both really care about our mom. We really, really care about the children in the family. And if we can start by establishing that we are in a reciprocal relationship already, we are in a shared world, we are exchanging resources already. And to establish that getting on the same page, so to speak, about the shared world, and expressing from a place of love about that, and actually being willing to, right, this is connect to care in a sense, right? But it's like be willing to start to perceive this person again as your teammate. Because, if you chop down one tree in the forest, it affects all the other beings in the forest. So rather than going around being like, I don't like that person, get rid of them, right? How does that ripple out into your shared world? Um, if you also can access statements of care for them personally, right? If all you can do is say, I love this shared world, and so we need to talk, and I want to talk from a place of wisdom and love for the sake of the shared world, be honest about that. If you're so mad at this person, or you can't quite forgive them, you can still have a resolution, a conflict resolving conversation for the sake of your shared world. This is another, I think, myth for some of us of like, I must just have overflowing empathy and compassion for everyone around me. No, you don't. And if when you go to your inner world and you're being very honest, you're really checking in on the truth, and it says, I actually don't trust this person. I still have some fear around this person. That's okay. Um, but I do find that more empathy and compassion will necessarily come from having interactions with this person where you observe them caring about the shared world, where you get them doing that. Great. I think it's a terrible idea, actually, to try to force or rush feelings of like tenderness, compassion for people. I think we should let that evolve organically from the care, from the genuine care of the shared. Um, and in a lot of cases, you'll be able to resolve conflict and also just be really clear that like, I'm not going to this person about this, or this person is not a safe person for me, like the person I call when I'm in trouble. That's fine. Just put them back into some formation where they can be a teammate as you guys share a world together. Okay, so here's the last little bits about how to approach this. We're just last kind of little, yeah, little pointers. Stay big in your self-love and your deservedness of equal respect. Do not back down on it. Do not make yourself smaller or less deserving in order to give to somebody else. You can stand very firmly in that, and should, and want the other person to do the same. Acknowledge your gifts, acknowledge your powers, acknowledge your authority, and the fact that you absolutely, as everyone sharing this world does, absolutely have a right to express, to be here, to receive from this world, and to give to it. And at the same time, that's balanced by being very, very humble about the fact that you are limited, that you have needs, that you experience kleshas, that you don't know everything. So if you can both be like relentless in your self-respect and very, very humble, it's like staying very big and strong in this one way, you know, of my sense of self-worth, but also kind of humble and flexible in this other way of honoring what about you is limited. Then you can absolutely find your way to, guess what, you can open yourself up to new insights, to new narratives, to a new way forward, because you're staying humble and fluid and not, I'm not totally complete, I'm not done yet, you know, I recognize that. You can keep inviting them to stay humble, right? And at the same time, not start to get into this place where we start to become manipulated away from our own truths and our own authority and our own self-worth and value. I know I gotta wrap this up. I just lost somebody else on the line, and Betsy and Kim, if you guys have questions, you can type them in, but yeah, I'm gonna wrap this up. Receive, and here's this other kind of pair, receive from the I am and give from the I am. So receiving from the I am means listening, and we practice this in our meditation. Listen to the other, really try to stay present with what they're saying while being aware of how it feels in your body. Check in right now. What does it feel like in your body to be sitting here listening to this talk? To, I don't know, maybe you got to go walk the dog after this, or to go to work, or what does it feel like, right? All these circumstances, what's going on inside you? Can you, as you listen to this person, stay grounded in that? I often, especially if it's a stressful conversation, breathe in and out of my feet and my belly and my pelvis a lot. That's very grounding for me. But also, the more that you can stay somatically aware, not only the less overwhelmed will you probably get, but also the more the deeper listening you're actually going to be able to do. It might sound ironic, like I'm just paying attention to me, but you're paying attention to how you feel right now in the present moment with this person, and it's actually going to open you up to hear what they're saying. Otherwise, we can start to get disembodied, and when you really are going to miss what they're saying is when you're disembodied and you're in the thoughts, you're in the chitta vritti again, you're in your stories again. Try to be in this present moment with them. So you're receiving what they're giving you from the I am. Really listen, be willing to have a revelation and have a transformation. And when you speak, Here's the last thing I'll say. When you speak, do your best to always speak from the I am. You can describe your own experiences, and I think it's important to actually describe your painful experiences that you've had that have brought about the conflict or brought about this need for conversation in the first place. You can absolutely acknowledge your history, the context, what else is going on in your life. Be careful of it seeming like you're making excuses, but it is important that each party gets a chance to say, this is what's going on for me. And then if you want to kind of tell the story of cause and effect, right? Acknowledge that we always only have a partial handle on the cause and effect. That's actually always cause and effect. Stories are always a little bit of avidya, right? Just like I made the example of the dishes story, something could have happened that you didn't understand or you weren't there for. Recognize that you don't have total authority on the outer world and the cause and effect and what's happening there. Always avoid telling somebody else how they feel or whether they're valid, or whether, catch yourself and pull it back and apologize if you accidentally do it, if you start to speak with authority about their experience. Give them the opportunity to do that for themselves, and listen really well when they do. Okay, I think that's more than enough for today. Thank you so much for being here. I don't see any questions, and so I think we'll go ahead and wrap that up for now, and I'll see some of you next week for our sharing circle. Thank you so much.